Absolutely.
You, sir, win as the longest waiter in line.
Yes.
This guy was here last night at about 4 a.m. What's your name?
No, I got
Richard, come in.
You want to put a band on
You
him?
definitely wanted to be first in there.
There you go.
The Dr. Shocker table, and you can use a credit card, and have Don and Lee and everyone, all the guests sign them. We have some amazing masks. Would you, Greg, may I have the genius? Oh, all right, April 1st. April 1st, April Fool. This is April the Calendar Gorilla, sculpted by Greg Duffy. This is the gorilla that nobody could ever get because it was in they needed the 12th monster. So it was never available. So this is available through Don-Con, as is a mask aptly called Genius.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So mask of Don Post Sr. And what's beautiful about this mask is our great friend, John Fasano. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest of honor. Ladies and gentlemen. This is an old theater trick. We take out the seats, so it's a standing ovation. I'm going to take these one of the monsters, get in there with Don, give you guys a photo op for a few moments. Everybody wants to get a picture. The Unimark stage was built by Mike Gaglio, all the masks, paired and created by our...
Joe, Mo, get on stage.
To the stage. What are we missing? Oh, look, I've got it. This is like grade school. All right, look, we all... Short people in the front. You all know. We got it. Get a little closer. Let's not cover the masks. Dante Rex will cry. You get in the middle. You're great. All right. Is that everybody? I know. Who's going up? What are you come up? Me. Just jump on the stage. Give him a push. Oh, good. Lee Lambert. So while you're taking your pictures, this is a very easygoing weekend. We're going to have Don will be here, Lee signing the book. You can get the book.
Should I have him say welcome to Don?
No one knows, but you have to see it. Everyone's welcome to Don-Con!
Nice!
Would be out exercising, walking down Lancashire Boulevard, and there was actually a code that they had at the front desk. If somebody was coming in and bothering them a little bit, they would call this code.
I'll never close the door.
We're going to get our pictures taken in front of that, I think.
Pretty bad. Thank you. Yeah, he wanted. It's funny. I asked him what age he wanted to see himself. He was like, "Well, I worked in surprise." Yeah. So he wanted to be surprised. Yeah. So I did kind of. After I did 40. Yeah, it's kind of like this is 16. This year was the biggest. Yeah, some makeup, some masks, some full size. We did. I'm sure they did everything.
when he started to tell me about all the previous attempts that had been made to do this, and I started thinking, okay, this is not a good idea. This will never happen. And then he said, so in other words, it's a great idea. You should really do it. So I said, oh, okay, I'll think about it. Danny went to talk to Don and got his blessing for the project to go ahead. I started putting some stuff together, and things just kind of snowballed from there, and 3 years later, here we are. I really hope this is something that everybody will enjoy.
Well, I think everyone enjoys it because they're sitting there, so that's the good news. It is true, you know, that, Don, do you want to bring up a chair and sit with us? No? Are you sure? This is his moment. He wrote the book. Are you sure? All right. He's the best. So I remember, you know, I was in the hospital, and this is the truth. No one told me about the Don Post thing for 3 or 4 days, because it was the day that I went down was the same day that Don Post went down, when God tried to take me out of the world. And I know that it was 3 days, 4 days later that finally someone said there's something else I want to tell you about. Because you know when someone's sick, you don't want to like freak them out more. And I found out Don Post Studios closed, and somebody bought the 1948 Frankenstein that never came up. It all happened like in the same day, and I almost died. So Lee, once you started writing the book, what was the first step? Bring us through the steps quickly, as you see them.
Again, for me, the first step was get in touch with the people who actually had the expertise, because I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be. I just happen to be blessed with a lot of friends who do have the knowledge, and they know the history of Don Post Studios. So I just got in touch with all of them, started getting materials from them, started picking their brains, and started putting my own stuff together. There's a lot of old interviews online, tracked all of those down, started making copious notes. Then once I had a whole volume of material, then it just became a matter of breaking it down and trying to organize it. And then I realized I had enough material to do maybe 3 or 4 volumes that would be an expensive set that nobody would ever buy.
Well, you and me and you, these people.
In other words, yeah, nobody else would buy. So really it became a matter of how do I organize this, and how do I try to make as many people happy as possible. And that's when it really became discouraging. And at one point, I started asking different collectors, how do you envision a book on Don Post Studios being? You know, what do you want this book to look like? And I would ask 20 different people, and I would get 20 completely different answers. And I will admit, I actually got to the point where I was ready to just say, forget it, I'm not going to do this. No, as it turned out, nobody is going to like this. I'm just going to put something together, and nobody's going to be happy. Nobody's going to be satisfied. I had no idea where to go. And I ended up having a little talk with Kathy Tharp that day. And she was the one who told me, well, you're the one who's doing this, it's your book. Just put together what you want. And the more I thought about that, that really kind of resonated with me. And this way, if I'm just doing it for myself and not for anybody else, that feeling's going to come through. So that picked me up a little bit, and I kept going, and like, here we are. It came together, and a lot of people seem to be very happy with it. So that's been a real blessing to hear all the positive words, hear all the comments, and just hear that people like it. And I think probably the greatest thing for me personally is people will open it, and I mean, all of us, we're all in our 40s and 50s now. flipping through this, and you can actually watch people becoming kids again. And that's just been the best part of this.
Well, it's an interesting thing, you guys. I mean, this is like preaching to the choir. So many talented people, sculptors, creators sitting in front of us. But something that happens, as Eric Piggers was talking about the cultural impact of Don Post Studios, there is this mass ownership, this implicit ownership of Batman or Superman or Don Post. And so they make the Batman movie and they don't make it the way you envision it, and you're like, that's terrible, it's a terrible Batman movie. I remember right when the book came out, we were both getting a little frustrated with people saying the initial book, how come this isn't in that? How come that isn't in that? And I started saying, how come you didn't write it? How come you didn't publish it? You know, the guy, no, but this, I don't know if you know this about Lee, but in his real life edition at Mask Fest.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a backstory here. I've told some of you this story before, I've discussed it in interviews before, but for those who haven't heard, what happened is we had the book set to go. We were going to do a nice hardcover edition, softcover edition. We had a book that we really wanted people to see. And then 5 weeks to the day before the launch event at Mask Fest, printer contacted us and told us, sorry, we underestimated the size of the book and we can't do it. So we had our commitments to Mask Fest that we had to honor. You know, they really went above and beyond for us, and we ended up scrambling. We got somebody who was able to give us 50 advanced copies for Mask Fest, and then another 450 copies on top of that. We could only get soft covers, and we had to cut a lot of material. So we went into Mask Fest with those 50, and within 20, we honestly did not know what the reaction was going to be to this book. We had thought, okay, we'll probably sell all 50 over the weekend. We had a Q&A booked for the Saturday afternoon, and we thought, you know, maybe we'll have to use that Q&A to try and push the last few books. As it turned out, within 20 minutes, all 50 copies were gone.
20 minutes. And did I get mine? No.
You would have gotten yours if you hadn't been up in Vancouver with Grumpy Cat.
That's right, I was with Grumpy Cat. So 20 minutes, we sold those 50, and then it took another 3 or 5 days to sell the rest of the run, right? Nothing, as I recall.
It was a couple weeks after that.
But we sold the edition out quickly.
Probably because it took that long to ship.
Yeah, no, the remaining 450, I mean, the entire 500 copy run sold out very quickly. So then we're like, what do we do now? Are we going to do another run? Is there still a sustained demand for this book? Let's just wait and see. So we started, this is it. So we thought it over, and we were well aware of the fact that, you know, people who spent money, especially the people who went and dropped $100, $150 on eBay for this book, once they found out we were coming out with a new and better edition, they were not going to be very happy with us. But in the end, we decided we're going to do the best book possible. And if people were unhappy with it, they didn't understand, so be it. We'll respect their feelings, but we're not going to let that stop us from producing a better book. So that's what we did. And perhaps doing a special collector's edition in a collector box with a latex cover. And we thought that'd be a neat idea, but it just wasn't doable. So we ended up thinking, how can we possibly make this book even better? And that's when we came up with the slipcase idea. So what we ended up doing is we started thinking, okay, who can do this? And fortunately, because it has the name Don Post Studios on it, there were a lot of artists that would have been very happy to help us out with this. However, I'd gotten quite familiar with the work of Greg Duffy here from Creature Revenge Studios, and him, his wife Jennifer, and their crew in Charlotte. They do a lot of fantastic work. So we decided they should be the ones to do this. And it's funny, we started take the pre-orders for the slipcase editions, and they just started trickling in. They didn't come in fast and furious. However, as soon as Greg finished this slipcase and we started posting a few pictures, we were sold out within an hour. Wow. So, again, it's everybody else coming together and making this project work. I'm just one part of it. And really, everybody else deserves just as much credit as I do. But, yeah.
That's very nice. The truth is, it's very kind of you to say, but this was an enormous undertaking, and everybody else was just there at your back. You're the one, you are our general, you are moving forward, and that's why it exists, and that's why it's as perfect as it is.
It's really neat how this came to be. And again, it was designed by our late friend John Fasano, who I think would have absolutely loved this weekend. And it was sculpted by Rob Herman and commissioned by Matt Post. And Matt, thank you very much for allowing us to use the master that was made. And what we ended up doing is we sent it off to Greg and Jen, and Greg added the hair, he finished the copies, made the mold, and we had to come up with a name for the mask. And Greg had a really good idea. He was going to call it the Don, being Don Post was seen as the godfather of Halloween. But we end up looking at this one photograph. It's on the hang tag. It's also in the book, just in case any of you want to buy a book and look it up. You can see it for yourself. It's in much better quality than on the hang tag. Just throwing that out there. But there's this old photo of Don at work, and his wife had handwritten on the bottom, "Genius." So I suggested to Greg, why don't we just call it Genius and credit Mrs. Post with the name. And that's what we did.
The guy who can't read, Corey Glenn.
First off, I wanted to say thanks so much for this amazing book. Compared to everybody else in this room, I'm new to mask collecting, and this is going to be an amazing resource for me, along with, as you said, Pete's incredible blog. It's just great to have. And I was just curious, yourself, how long have you been collecting masks? And a little background on you as a mask collector.
A year, 1 or 2 years?
About that, yeah.
No.
No, I used to love masks when I was a kid. And of course, my mom was always the one who would say, no, you can't have a mask. You can't breathe, you can't see, you walk out into the street, you'll get hit by a car.
Same on.
And I mean, those are all valid points. However, they didn't result in me getting a mask. But eventually, yes, I did get my first mask. And I always loved the masks. I could never really afford them. So I just looked at them in the magazines. And it really wasn't until I became an adult and started having this disposable income stuff that I started to, buy these things I started to really love when I was a kid. And it's just sort of grown from there.
Help us, because the more I can protect it, the better. I understand. Very good. Thank you. There you go. Is that all good? Yes, thank you very much. Richard?
Yep, that's me.
Are you really from Mount?
Yeah.
Really?
do demonstrations and wear the makeup, and this was designed to fit one of those guys, one of the other actors. Martha actually usually portrays a mutant beneath the Planet Apes. This is her first time being a
when you got Disney and Marvel and Star Wars, they just want to hang on to that. You know, they don't want to go this direction because that's obviously all the movies got inflated. So that's why they went that way.
Edition, you know, DVD, just because it's really, and also because I think it's different from no matter how lumpy hair it sounds, it's like, dude.
David is a toyaholic. So the first two things we're going to show you are, we're going to introduce everybody and tell us what you did at Don Post Studios, please.
I'm John Nolan, and I was head of R&D and special projects from 1978 to 1983, and did the liaison and all the Star Wars stuff and 44 special projects, including Dune and Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, all that stuff. So
a lot of, I was hearing a lot of yes, please. John, pardon my puns.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ort Hitchcock, and I worked at Don Post from 1977 to 1985. I did a little bit of everything. I worked as a receptionist, I worked with data entry, I initialized their first computer system, so I didn't do any of the art, but I certainly enjoyed being around the artists that were there.
Well, John, clearly, I love it, he said. Don, without the people filling the orders, there's no orders, you know what I mean? Bill.
Hello,
Exercise. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to give this to my minion and we're going to figure it out. Bill, talk loud.
Okay, I will try to do that.
Make it loud.
I introduced the masks, sold the masks, science fiction convention. We're just starting that, and a lot of people really love them. Knock them off. made you look
Made you look good, I like that. Sir, what's your name? Sir, your name, please?
I'm Don Post. And you guys out there are the ones who make the things.
Thank you. Coming back up. Thank you, sir.
Oh, hold court, please. A lot of rules.
I just want to say.
Yes.
Barb, your brother worked at Don Post Studios too. And what does he do now?
Paul?
Yeah.
He's executive vice president of feature animation at Fox.
And he worked at Don Post Studios. I'll give him my card. Okay, coming down line.
I'm Steve Wang, and I never actually had the pleasure of working at the studio per se, but I did do a bunch of freelance masks for Don in the late 90s, like 1998-ish. And I brought this mask because this was the very first mask I ever made for Don Post Studios. It's so funny, man. And this is also painted by Rob Thorpe as well, this copy. And the way this came about was I had met with Don for the first time, and being a big fan, you know, after I did my fanboy spiel, Don says, you know, I want a kidney bean alien. And I said, what's a kidney bean alien? And then he said, he pointed to, like, you know, the aliens from the movie, you know, and I thought, okay, I get it, kidney bean. So I went away and I did the sculpture, and this was the first of many masks that I sculpted freelance for Don Post Studios.
My name is Michael Levitri, and I've not known Don for years since.
It's the worst thing ever.
I've known Don since I was about 10 years old, and I was privileged to have Don and his father help take my first life cast when I was 11 years old, and which I still have. I used it to learn a lot of things about sculpture and mold making. And then jump ahead, I worked with Eric actually on the development of the Stormtrooper mannequin in, what was it, 97? Roughly, somewhere in there. So I was there for about a year and worked on a lot of the Star Wars masks.
I have to say something about Mike. I met him when he was 10 years old, when he rear-ended me on his bike while I was driving my car. He wasn't looking, and he ran into the back of my car. Now, how do you randomly meet somebody like that? He's a very talented guy, and worked briefly at Don Post Studios on the Star Wars stuff.
Cool. How about that? It's funny, Michael Levitri used his life cast to teach himself how to sculpt. I look at mine and just think, how did I get so fat? Ross.
My name is Russ Lukic, and I grew.
Russ Lukic fan.
I grew up a Don Post fan and a Don Post collector, and 2010, 2011, around that time, Don was kind enough to give me work as a sculptor, and I did whatever Don told me, so that's...
May I have some tape, please? Eric, here you go.
Careful. Well, hello, all you marvelous people who I have thoroughly enjoyed hearing your excited buzz today throughout this great event, and seeing all the masks and things that you're all creating. I got the privilege of working with Don during the 90s and through the turn of the century. And during the Lancashire facility, which had a rather large production aspect to it, it was absolutely stimulating to walk into a factory that is dedicated to making these things and seeing the molds and the age of things around. It's real exciting to lift up a foam master that has a dust footprint around it. It's really cool. And to have latex arrive in a tanker, much like you see on the streets. I don't know how much that cost you, But we took it for granted because it was like latex coming out of a faucet. You could just turn this faucet on, and it was quite extraordinary.
We would buy latex at 3,000 gallons at a time. We had a 5,000 gallon tank, and we'd buy 3,000 gallons at a time. And
Taping this to your hand so it never.
and that was pretty cool. Eric is an interesting fellow because when he came out to interview to look for a job, his car blew up on the way there. So he rode a bike, and he didn't have any money when he started working there. And my wife and I go to the movies, and we'd see Eric every time at the movies. Well, the reason is Eric didn't have a place to live at the time, and he was sleeping in a graveyard down in Burbank. And the guy, who worked in the graveyard felt sorry for him. And so he'd give Eric clothes. The problem is that the clothes would button up the back because they were for the corpses. And Eric was really talented. One of the really excellent selling masks that Don Post Studios ever had was Slash. And that was the first thing you ever sculpted at Don Post Studios. And then, not only that, but he was instrumental in going up to Lucasfilm with me in order to get all the pieces for those Star Wars characters that we did. And we went up there and measured them and drew them and did all sorts of things got a whole bunch of things to bring together so that we could create those characters. And Eric, he's just fantastic. And I have so many good memories.
I love you too, Don. I love you too, Don. I love you too very much, yeah. And actually what we did is we brought the parts down so Mike Levitri could fix all of Lucasfilm's work. Anyway, passing the mic on. Thank you very much. I don't know. Anyway, I have to get back at you, Don. The Lancashire facility didn't have a large mirror in the sculpting area, and so the bathroom had the biggest mirror. So Don would come in and take your mask and wander into the bathroom, and then you'd hear from around the corner. And then he'd come out and hand it back to you.
And there were molds all over the floor. And I said, Eric, so people are going to trip over these things. It's got to be picked up. It's got to be cleaned up. And he says, I know where everything is. He says, I won't step on anything. Eric is not the cleanest guy, but he was good.
John, can you take that? John, if I don't pass this down, the guy with the tattoos is going to shank me in the parking lot.
I'm Mikey Rotella. I'm the guy with the tattoos. I don't have a shank on me though right now, so it's all right. I was lucky enough to do a handful of sculpts in 2012, I think, and I probably don't deserve to be up here, but I'm just glad that I got a little piece, and I got to be part of Don Post Studios just for a second. So it's huge for me because I'm a fan.
My name's Ken Horn, and I worked with Don Sr. and Jr. in the earlier days. And I worked with the hair department with June, and I did all the hair, and we had to get those hair on that mask in 0 time. We had like almost 60 masks within an hour we had to do. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, the whole group did it, yeah. And then Don was nice enough to hire me back. I quit the studio, and I went to do Superman, the motion picture. But he said, nobody's coming back if they're in the movie business. And I came back, and he goes, Okay, I'll hire you back because you know how to do hair.
My name is Susan McGinnis. I airbrushed from 1974 to 77, and I think I was one of the first people that really knew how to repair an airbrush, because I remember people were kind of like, huh, you know? And these are my gift giveaways, the pens and the magnets there. And to show you how long latex lasts, this is from about 1974 bald cap.
Ken Horn is wearing one of those bald caps now, as a matter of fact. So do you know, I think what we'll do, because we have such a nice informal group and it's so nice, why don't we, if you have a question, who would you like to direct it to? I know we want to hear about some special projects John has and whatnot, but let's start with a few questions. Anything anybody has wanted to ask the employees of Don Post Studios, other than why didn't I ever get the mask from Famous Monsters? That was someone else to be mad at. So any questions? Ursus, anything? Or you are a go? You're just a gorilla, okay. A question, yes, please, stand up and say it out loud.
For Don, what's the true story behind Death Cyborg and the Vader?
The true story behind Death Cyborg.
You want a true story from Don? Oh.
Thanks, Eric. Actually, Cyborg was sculpted a year before Star Wars.
Bullshit!
It was sculpted by Bill Malone, and it was sculpted a year before that movie came out. And we started selling them, and when Star Wars came out, there's no way you could make enough of those masks. We had no idea how popular that would be. So people would buy the Cyborg mask, and they would get a Nazi helmet or something like that and sell it with the Cyborg mask. And Lucasfilm came and they called and they said, "What's with this Cyborg mask? It looks a lot like Darth Vader." And I said, "And can you send one?" So we sent one over there, and they said, "When did you sculpt this?" And it had a copyright on it, and we said, it was before Lucasfilm, it was before Star Wars, we didn't know anything about it, we know nothing, we were mowing our lawn. So it did precede Star Wars. Maybe it was something in our collective minds that said that this was coming, that told us that this was coming. So it did precede Star Wars, and we did make a lot of them because people couldn't get the Darth Vader masks. We had no idea. I mean, when I originally looked at our artwork, I said, this will be bigger than Frankenstein. Well, it was. It was a lot bigger than Frankenstein. I was estimating we'd sell twice as many of these as Frankenstein. And it was way, way bigger than that.
Don, would you just tell us briefly how Lucas contacted you? You were one of the original licensees, right?
Right. Well, the way that it worked is I got this envelope in the mail, and it had this beautiful catalog on Star Wars. It had pictures of legions of stormtroopers lined up, had pictures of Darth Vader, and some of the other characters. And I was wowed. I showed it to Bob Short and Bill Malone, and I said, we got to get this license. So I got the thing on a Friday, and I said, I'm going to wait till Monday before I call them, because I didn't want to be too excited about it. So I called with a little bit of chip on my shoulder. I said, yeah, it looks pretty good. We'll take a license on it. So we became the first ones, besides publishing, to agree to a Star Wars license. They sent me Mark Pevers sent me a 1-paragraph thing, this letter. And it said, we appreciated the job that you did on Planet of the Apes, and we thought you might be interested in this. You can have this license for a $500 upfront charge and guarantee. Now today, you'd be looking at $250,000. When I'd go home at night, they'd be flashing it, still flashing. And it was incredible. I had to have my home phone changed to a private number because people were calling the home phone and talking to my wife and trying to get Star Wars masks from her. So Star Wars there'll never be anything like it. I'll never see anything. You'll never see anything. I don't think anybody will ever see anything like it. The studios are much more prepared for that kind of marketing now. And it was just crazy time. And, and I want to say, it was just one of those things at Don Post Studios where we had so much fun. And I think even Sue would say that she had a lot of fun working there. Yes. And I think everybody did. We were kind of like a hands-free company. We let people do their work, and people liked it. They had fun, and we just all had fun. And I look back on it as just an amazing. Don Post Studios for me was an amazing experience, and I think we had more fun than the fans and the people who collected the masks did.
You had fun, Don, but nobody was karate chopping you or putting cream pies in creature masks.
You don't know some of the things we did.
I do. I remember you going to a Monty Python movie. Didn't you guys go to dressed in Monty Python garb?
Well, I remember we were going to the con down in San Diego when it was a real small thing, and we were running up and down the stairs with dart guns, having fights with dart guns. Here's these young adults running up and down the stairs. How far would you get doing that today in a hotel?
Indeed. Another question. Why was Mr. High Painted red in the reissues?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And probably some of the paint jobs moved around and got a little bit, more intense than they should have been. But we really tried with those masks to make them, really for the collectors. My whole idea in getting that license, I went to Universal Studios and I said, look, we wanted the Universal license. And they started pulling out all these modernized versions of the Universal characters and said, this is the way we want to do them. And I said, look, Disney has Mickey Mouse. You don't see him changing Mickey Mouse. I said, there's all these different, Warner Brothers, it's Bugs Bunny is Bugs Bunny. You don't see him trying to modernize Bugs Bunny. I said, what are you doing? Because if Frankenstein goes to a personal appearance and Mickey Mouse is there, Mickey Mouse will pack up and leave because everybody's more interested in Frankenstein than they are in Mickey Mouse. I said, don't make us change it. This is what we want to do. And they let us do it. My thing at the time is, I merged Don Post Studios in 1990. And by 99, my then partner wanted out. He was getting older, and he was then ready to relax. And I said, well, I want to do this universal thing. And he just wanted to add some charm to the company. So he let me go ahead and get this universal license. And I tell you, my aim was to do it for you guys, to make something that you wanted. You don't know how many times I heard the same story from people. You know, you made those universal masks for so long, and then you stopped making them, and by the time I could afford them. And so I said, that was in my mind, and that was what my objective was to make something that you guys would appreciate. We made them thicker because we knew you wanted to collect them and not wear them. And there were a couple people who called and said, they said, well, these are too thick, I can't wear them. I said, you're not supposed to wear them. It's a collector's item. So we made those masks, Don Post Studios made those masks for you guys. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to give you something that you would appreciate. And as a thank you for all the support that you gave us. So, you know, that was something that I'm really happy that we were able to really give back on the universal masks. When the company went to Paper Magic, they didn't really get it. They ended up with a bunch of masks that they never sold because they didn't know how to sell them. They didn't know how to reach out to individuals. So, okay, that's enough.
I thought you were done. I wasn't cutting you off. I thought you were done.
Oh, I could talk. I just could keep talking.
I want to bring it to you, John, but first I want to say, what was the weirdest phone call you got at Don Post?
Oh gosh, you know, most of them were really just about Star Wars because I was brought on to answer those 3 phone lines. I was all of 17 and a half. I don't even think I had a job interview. I think I just landed at the desk and I started answering phones, and I remember Kermit Eller coming in. I remember the gentleman who played Chewbacca coming in, and I actually had the opportunity a few years ago to meet him at Comic-Con, so that was really thrilling, remembering seeing him in the Don Post Studios. And I don't actually remember a weird phone call. There were a lot of weird ones.
I got you. All right, here, John, wait, hold on. Eric, you were there. You were the weird phone call.
I may have done that. I have a question for Steve. It's obvious you have an affinity for the creature from the Black Lagoon. Do the styles you do have a species name? What kind of animal are you making? Me? Yeah, sorry, Steve. Sorry, Mr. Wang. Mr. Wang. Yeah, generally, what do you say you're making when you're making a thing like the creature? Do you call them creatures? Do you call them fishmen? What do you make? What are those?
Jaegers.
Jaegers.
Jaeger. There you go. I don't understand the question.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
When I went home that night, I put the mask on and I drove home with the mask on. And it was Frankenstein 2001. That one really, I really liked that one. I really did.
We had no choice. And it was a lot of fun in those days. Plus, we also got to work on special projects like the character for the professor, him. We made the mask for that. We did a Ford commercial. We made 6 of them for him, and they used them in the car commercials.
Of a professor or something. And by the way, let me just say, if you guys don't know of the greatest secret in Hollywood, is it the Hollywood Museum?
Hollywood Museum, Max Factor.
In the Max Factor building, everyone says, why isn't there a museum in Hollywood? There is a museum in Hollywood. Ken is, are you one of the curators there?
I'm one of the curators.
Yeah, it's an amazing, you see Superman's costume, Vampiro's costume, models from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. I mean, the set from Silence of the Lambs. It's unbelievable. So if you haven't seen it, the Max Factor building, it's fantastic. And because I know I'm looking out and I know everybody's been here since early on. Is there any great, other than fixing and saving the spray paint, the spray gun, is there any other thing you remember that you loved?
Yeah. I remember Don Sr., when I first came in, he actually gave me like a business card holder with the Universal masks on, like when I just started. And I thought that was pretty special. I still have that. And I still have my business cards from Don Post.
Oh, gosh. Your name or the Don Post name? Yeah, our lawyers would like to talk to you about that. Oh, how great is that? How great. Mike, when doing the Star Wars, those Star Wars, you did the life-size Stormtrooper? Those were gorgeous. Now, did you have Lucasfilm come down and pay attention?
Well, let's see. The helmet, as I recall, was an original, or we used one of the helmets came down from up north. The rest of the body was derived from parts that I sort of created back at Return of the Jedi time. And we used those as a basis for that mannequin. So we cut and pasted and fabricated and made it thinner. I remember, as I recall, the only thing they had us change was the thighs. The thighs were too thick. And other than that, it passed muster pretty quickly, as I recall.
Yes, it did. And for that, my basis for making all of those is we started out with a life cast of a human being. And for that particular thing, and he was here earlier, one of the Don Post employees, and I'm kind of trying to come up with a name, Phil Griffith. We took a life cast of Phil Griffith, and we built it over that, and I guess his legs were a little bit thick, so we had to slim down his legs a little bit. But, not that he wasn't fat or anything, it just had to be thinner. It had to be tighter. So we created those, and the advantage of doing it that way is each one of those figures could stand on its own without any support. It just had its own balance. And that stuff, I mean, we worked so hard, and I can still see Mike over in the corner adjusting that head. Now the heads, like the Stormtrooper, I said to Lucasfilm, I said, can we get copies of the heads? And they charged me $1,500 for two flimsy pieces of plastic that were glued together. Right? Two vacuum formed pieces. And I contend that on each of those 4 Star Wars characters that we did, that they look better than they looked in the movie. You know, I think we did a great job on Mike. Well, the thing that happened in 1977, the thing that really happened with Universal Studios was I got out of the blue, in the middle of our manufacturing, I got a letter to cease and desist the manufacture of the Universal mask, that they were taking away the license. Now, years before, we kept saying we want a renewal on the Universal license. And they'd say, oh, I'll just go ahead and keep making them, and we're not going to renew the license. And they did that for several years. And then they call me, like, in August, and they say cease and desist. We were always a company that we really didn't have that much money, so we were producing to deliver all the time. And I called him up and I said, if you want to take the license away, I said, that's fine. But I'm not going to stop until October 31st. And if you try to do anything about that, you go right ahead. And because I had commitments, I had orders. It was almost like someone out there that we don't know about was trying to sabotage the company. And so we manufactured through that date. And at the end of that date, the guy at Universal Studios, he calls me, I called him and I said, okay, we're quitting. And he says, well, no, I want to talk to you about that. So whatever thing was going on out there that I don't know about, that probably had fallen through. And I went in and I was pretty irate. And I told them, they said, well, we want to make another license with you. And they quoted me like a 10% royalty, which was doubling the royalty, and all these demands and everything like that. And I made probably an error in judgment in that I said, forget it. And they said, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to make your own characters? I said, yeah. And I said, they won't do anything. They won't be in any conflict with what you have. And they said, if you infringe on our rights, we will cut through you like fire through wood. And I said, okay. I said, that's it, I'm leaving. They said, if you walk out that door, you'll never have a license with Universal Studios again. And I said, watch me. And I walked out the door. And in retrospect, I should have sat there and worked out a deal, because Universal Studios was very important to Don Post Studios. It was like 2 months later that I learned about Star Wars. And that really was a savior. But Universal Studios, after Star Wars began to become a more normal license, I have to admit that I missed the Universal Studios license. That was a great license. It had lots of meaning, and I shouldn't have stopped doing it. But somebody, it was all caused by somebody somewhere, and I don't know who, trying to sabotage Don Post Studios. Died down a little bit. We paid for several years, and it took us the middle of the 80s to really recover, and that was due to Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. And that's what, and let me say, it wasn't Michael Myers, it was The Mask, which Don Post Studios owned the sculpture. And if it wasn't for those two things, it would be very different. But we were just so fortunate to have things come along that would make up for all the little glitches. And we were just very lucky.
John, briefly.
Quick, there was animosity here. So I came from Universal. I came from, the Land of a Thousand Faces and stuff. And years later, Don Post's fabulous head of marketing, a guy named Bill Mason, he says to me, he says, we have got to get a license on ET. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think we can do anything with Universal. And Bill set up the meeting, and we went over to the meeting. And the guy, I think it might have been the same guy, and he, I said, you guys used to do all this stuff with Post, and he said to me, oh well, we quit working with Post because they owed us money, never paid us. And I went back and told Don that, and Don was not a happy head camper at all. And he came back with the paperwork that proved that they had paid every cent to Universal. It had nothing to do with that. And walked back in, and actually you walked back in with it and got over there and showed up, and he went, Okay, sorry. And that's kind of what started and led back to Universal. And E.T., of course, which we sold a bazillion.
Yeah, we got a hold of the E.T. license. We got a hold of that late. And there was somebody else trying to get the license. And they guaranteed that they would make 5,000 masks the first year with that license and pay them a 15% or a higher royalty than we would pay. And I said, look, we'll pay you 10%, but we'll make 50,000. And that's a lot more money than you're talking about. So anyway, we got that license, and we did make the money. But on the other end of it, the demand kept going on past the Halloween season. So we kept making masks, and we had deliveries for November and December going into Christmas. And that came back to bite us, because as it got close to Halloween, the demand for ET licensing diminished, and people started canceling their orders. And I had ET masks for years after the license was over with. So, those things can work both ways.
So I know it's late. It's been a wonderful day. Tomorrow we're going to open at 10. We're going to have a very nice informal Mexican meal out here with Don and anybody else who'd like to join. Informal, casual. The show will go from 10 to 5 tomorrow. And I want to say thank you to Eric. Why don't you come up here? I'll go down there. Let's switch. Quickly. Don't ask Steve Wang any questions. Ladies and gentlemen, the staff of Don Post Studios. Why don't you guys take a bow?
KO for $5 a piece in 1947. And we made a lot of product on those tables. And I think one of the things I remember is taking a nap on those tables, probably when I was 3 or 4 years old. So I was an only kid, and if my parents had to go down to work, it was really a mom and pop type business. And if they had to go down to work, well, I was down there too. And I remember taking a nap on these tables. And we had these tables up to the day Don Post Studios died. And really? Yeah. We had those tables. So you can imagine it, trying to depreciate $5 over 60-some years. That was a good investment. So I got to be around that. And the only thing I really knew is that my dad was in charge of it. And I had a lot of pride in that, and a lot of sense of belonging and being, just from being around that atmosphere. And I remember telling my dad one time, I said, I'll bet there's never been a project that you haven't been able to solve or complete. And he said, you betcha. I don't know whether that's true or not. He made it feel like he was some kind of genius. And in growing up then, when you go to bed at night, you know that things are still going to be there in the morning. And life is going to go on, and you can rely on things being the same. And that's a big comfort, I think, to a kid.
and then you give your own kids that same comfort. That's pretty great. And
Maybe.
well, I don't know. Well, I know it was fun. At some point, though, when it was time to go into the mask business, you went into the Navy, right?
No.
Baseball?
I went into the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
I served 2 years in the Coast Guard. And you know, when you're going through growing up, you kind of have to find your own way and make your own decisions. There was someone here yesterday, this family I knew, and I've known her since she was 7. And then later on, we went to church together, like these folks over here, and their family, and I kind of built on that. And before I was involved with Don Post Studios, I was involved in these people too. And then I got involved with this troublemaker over here, Sharon. So, yeah, and she's been a lot of trouble in my life. So, I kind of found my way. I didn't know what I was going to be or that I was going to continue on in Don Post Studios. It was probably in the back of my mind. When I got out of the service, the first day, John Chambers was down at Don Post Studios, and he said, "You come by the makeup union, we'll get you signed up as an apprentice. You can be a makeup artist." And I said to my dad, I said, you know, I'd rather be here. I said, I think there's a lot of potential. This is a company that in 1968 did $38,000 worth of business total. And it was enough for my dad to, you know, support himself. And although it had been a little bit bigger years before, that's what it was when I walked in there. And I said I thought it had potential. And my dad said, he says, well, he says, you can do whatever you want. He says, there it is, you can do whatever you want. So it was just kind of handed to me, the opportunity to do something with Don Post Studios. And this was July 5th, 1968. So July 6th, which I think was a Tuesday, I climbed in behind the spray booth and I started painting masks. And that's what I did in 1968. I flat out, that's all I did, is paint masks. And in 1969, that's all I did, is paint masks, along with a couple other people that came in and painted masks with me. And they were people like most of you. They were young kids who were interested in makeup and special effects, and they just came in and did that. One of the guys I remember, he was a kind of a naive guy, but very smart, straight A student at college, and he wanted to be a makeup artist. And it was a lot of, it was very interesting to see him that year because, you know, he worked on masks and Ben Lane came in and he said, oh, Mr. Lane, yeah, I want to be a makeup artist. He said, well, I got a job for you, makeup job. So he sent this kid out to work on a movie. It was a porno movie. And so, and this guy was a very kind of conservative guy. And he told me later that he said, oh, he says the lady working in the movie, she was really a nice lady. and she had a child. And he's telling me all about her, and he says, I was so embarrassed when during a break they called me in and said, put a little rose on her cheek. So he went to put some rose on her cheeks, and they said, no, not those cheeks. Oh, no. Come on. How can it happen?
What was the name of that makeup artist.
I can't remember. I can't remember because it's been too long.
Well, other than me, who was your favorite celebrity who came in?
Other than you?
Remember, I would always tell Jim McPherson, tell Don Post I said hi, and he'd say, why can't you tell him yourself? I drove me crazy. Why don't we take one more question and let people go back and look at masks? Anything else?
Yeah, didn't I hear that Tor Johnson visited?
Oh, Tor Johnson visited. Yes, and I remember Tor coming in one time to see my dad, and he was kind of this big, lumbering, gentle guy. And that kid I was telling you about, that was the makeup artist in the porn movie. I wish I could think of his name, but he came in and he says to him, he says, "You do a good job for Mr. Post." "Oh, yes, sir." And he says, "Well, I'll be back." And he was a kidder, and I remember that he get into his Dodge station wagon, and that car would actually groan. I'm telling you, it would groan. But he was there to see if he could collect some royalties or something like that.
Oh, now that's interesting. Was he paid royalties for the tour mask?
He was.
Oh, that's something I didn't know. And that is the most successful mask ever. So he must have lived like a millionaire.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, I think we sold up to 16,000 of those a year, and it was a tremendous thing. But I think the one thing that I remember is my youngest son Josh and I, we like Field of Dreams. I took him to a baseball game, the old Kaminsky Park in Chicago.
Talk louder.
It was the old Kaminsky Park in Chicago. And I took him to a baseball game, and I was thinking about how my grandfather used to take my dad to see baseball games there. I have a picture of my dad on the infield of Kaminsky Park in about 1914, before there was an outfield. And so I'm thinking about that picture, and I'm thinking about them, and we walk in out of the shadow of the tunnel into the light, which all of a sudden you're squinting. And Josh says to me, "Hey Dad, look at the scoreboard." And I look up at the scoreboard, and they're photographing someone who's wearing a Tor Johnson mask in the crowd. And it was, if any of you are familiar with the movie Field of Dreams,
Sure.
it was that moment. It was an amazing moment to see that, because you would see at that time, you'd see Tor Johnson in the stands at football games. You'd see him at baseball games and everything. But to have that happen was pretty amazing.
If you sculpt it, they will come.
It was like my dad saying, "I know you're here."
Yeah. Welcome back to Chicago.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Don. Thank you, everybody.